Her job isn't giving, her life isn't giving, everything is tumultuous. One thing that she has is Keanu Reeves. Don't ask too much because it don't make sense to me either. Everything is giving the highest, utmost of urgency. Everything except what's actually happening in the book. And just gets into the realm of absolute nonsense. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am CHIOMA or Chi, and today I'm going to be listing and talking about but talking about all the books that I DNF'd this year, because this is my DNF year. There's no reason for me at my big age to be reading books that I don't want to be reading. So I'm going to be talking about all the books that I started and could not finish, did not finish, would not pay me to finish, and how I feel about them, recommend them to, like, you know, maybe someone else. Maybe if it wasn't my cup of tea, it could be yours. So let's get into it. So the first book, I'm gonna start with my highest hopes to my lowest hopes. The first book is a book that I had high hopes. I mean a 4-star prediction for this book, and that is Hunt the Stars by Jessie Mihalik. This is a sci-fi space opera that is basically about two factions that are on the opposite sides of kind of like a space war. So they were previously in a space war. The main girl, the female main lead, she was a captain on her side, and the male main character was a captain on his side. So they're obviously enemies. They are beefing even though the war is ended. But it comes to happen that the captain of this rival faction, he is in search of a family heirloom that was stolen from his family, and he needs a captain who will come and find it that also has some sort of kind of confidentiality, because he doesn't want to hire anyone from his world, because then this would kind of like spread across, and he doesn't want that. So basically that's how they ended up in the same space, in the same spaceship. They're trying to find this. He hires her. She can't turn down the opportunity because of the amount of money that is coming into her, because she is kind of like not high demand because of the outcome of the war. So I got to probably about 35 to 40% of this book, and it seemed like it was in the makings to be a good book. But my thing is, it was as if the prequel of the book extended far into the actual book. So we have a lot of the world building, we have a lot of background, we have a lot of background on both of the captains, we have a lot of background on the different species and how they work. So I think that was very interesting when the author got into kind of like the differences between this like more humanoid faction and this other humanoid faction that kind of has more of kind of like telekinesis, powers outside the realm of what is like typical. So I thought that was all very interesting. But the problem is that the book seems to almost have never started. I got about 40% of the book, and at the 40% point, they are just off the ground. 40% of in, I felt like I was still 5 pages in. Just so much background to the point where I'm like, when is this starting? We're getting so much in-depth background on the characters, so much in-depth background, and this would be fine if it was a character-driven book where the in-depth background on the characters was somehow enhancing the story. That's the thing, it wasn't. It was really just in-depth background on the characters' personalities. When I tell you absolutely nothing happened the first 40%, they are just off the ground. So basically this person who was a former rival, former adversary in the war, employs her to kind of find this family heirloom, and even if she only like goes for like half the trip, she gets half of the money. It's a really great deal, and he really kind of like, even though they're enemies and she doesn't like him, he doesn't like her, or actually more, she just doesn't like him, he is just really adamant that like, you're the only one I can trust, you're the only one that can do this, blah blah blah. So you would think there's some sense of urgency. You think, okay, people need to hurry up. People got to find this. Someone has stolen something from you, and this thing that they stole can either like restart the war, start a whole different type of conflict on your world, and all these things that you're willing to go to a former enemy and bring them into your territory. Everything is giving the highest, utmost of urgency. Everything except what's actually happening in the book, because we're getting so much in depth on the idiosyncrasies, the just minutia, and the most irrelevant minutia on all of the characters who are part of this captain's squad, team, what are they called? Shipmates, whatever, part of this captain's crew. Just so much delving into their individual minds and their kind of daily personality traits that I'm like, there's no story happening. There was no story happening, and I got 40% of the way in. And one thing I'm not going to do, because I did this with the Spanish Love Deception, I'm not waiting until 75% of a book for it to get good, because that's not what should happen. So we're 40% of the way in, they're just off the ground, none of the kind of like actual planning, the plotting, anything to move across this kind of like chase for this heirloom in the space opera is actually happening. None of it's happening. Nothing is happening. So yeah, even though it had a lot of potential, there is just a lot of elements that make up a good sci-fi book. The amount of narrative that was around the actual plot or actual idiosyncrasies about even the main characters was just so few and far between that it just made the book pointless. And it just seemed like the type of book that the last 25% of the way, that's when everything in the plot was starting to kick, was going to start to kick. And I'm just not waiting that long. I'm not waiting to 75% of the book for it to get good. So this book was my first DNF of this year, I believe. That's it. Don't recommend. Also didn't finish it, so don't know, but I do not recommend. The next book, another book I had extremely high hopes for, was on my physical TBR for I think about a year, but I just wasn't in my contemporary romance bag in 2022, so I did not read I think I read probably maybe up to 10 contemporary romances in 2022. It just wasn't my thing. But this year, February, I think I read about 15. This month I've read 3. I'm in my contemporary romance bag, you feel me? So I decided to finally read How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days by K.M. Jackson. Sounds like such a fun book. Sounds like a title that you give a rom-com, a contemporary romance. The cover is just amazing, like adorable cover, which is 90% of the reason I bought it. But then How to Marry Keanu Reeves, I also love Keanu Reeves. I also would make this same type of scheme to try to marry Keanu Reeves. So basically the premise of this is about a girl. And you know, typical rom-com tropes, she is a woman who is down on her luck, her job isn't giving, her life isn't giving, everything is tumultuous. One thing that she has is Keanu Reeves. Don't ask too much because it don't make sense to me either. So she makes a scheme after finding out that Keanu Reeves is engaged and is going to get married in 90 days. So the whole premise of the book is far-fetched, but I'm like, the far-fetchedness must add to the comedic element. So it's supposed to be a romantic comedy. So either she ends up breaking this marriage and she gets married to Keanu Reeves, or there is a male love interest somewhere that is with her along this journey, and that's where the romance ensues. But it kind of dwells past the realm of reality for a contemporary book and just gets into the realm of absolute nonsense. Because when I tell you, the real premise of this book is about a girl who just takes time off from her job, takes time off her responsibilities, takes time off of her life to literally stalk Keanu Reeves across the country, try to find him, to try to convince him not to get married in 90 days. I was fine when that was a joke, when that was like, jokey, that's the title, this girl really loves Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves getting married maybe is like making her spring into action and do something with her own life, yada, yada, yada. But no, it's literally her with the main male character trying to find Keanu Reeves, and her whole plan for getting her life back together is her finding Keanu Reeves and stopping this wedding. And it was funny until it wasn't. And it wasn't about 25 pages in or something, because it starts to get nonsensical. And when it starts to get nonsensical and it's contemporary, I need something else to happen. I need at least some magical realism. I need there to be a motif that makes the nonsensicalness sensible. But it just didn't happen, and it made me so annoyed with the female character and also the main male character, because you guys are both going on with this nonsensicalness as if it's something that makes sense in the realm of reality when it absolutely doesn't. And the way it was actually affecting the main character just made me extremely annoyed with everything that was going on in the book. So annoyed that I didn't want to read it didn't want to finish it, because it's also following a common trend that I'm finding in contemporary romance and the romantic comedy genre, is that a lot of women's fiction and chick lit is being rebranded as contemporary romances when there is a main male character, regardless of whether or not it's a romance. And I don't even think that line is not a fine line. It's actually a very thick line. Like, it's hard to jump from a contemporary romance into women's fiction and vice versa. Just having a man as a main male character does not a romance make. But a lot of books I felt that I read last month and I read the month before are starting to do that thing where they're transversing women's fiction and chick lit into the contemporary romance realm. And this book is another one of them, because it's really about her every single time she's devastated because she misses Keanu Reeves, like the actual Keanu Reeves. She's actually stalking him. And every time she's devastated, I mean, like sneaking on sets to find him. Every time she's devastated because she misses Keanu Reeves by like a half second, she starts to reevaluate her life in another nonsensical way, because the whole thing is nonsensical, but in a way that I'm like, this is not about like you making these decisions and then it building upon the romance. This is about you making the decision and it's building upon the coming of age aspect of this book, which is why if I had finished this book, I guarantee it would have been classified as women's fiction or chick lit as opposed to contemporary romance, even though it's advertised as contemporary romance. That was a long tangent about why this is not contemporary romance, but now you know. So I DNF this book. I have no desire to read it again. I am going to keep it in my collection because maybe I will read it even though I have no desire, and also the name is really cute and fun, so I will keep it in my collection and maybe possibly one day. I doubt it. This one I'm unhauling this. I'm giving this away. It's a horrible one. The next book that is a book I DNF'd in I think January, and that is Love and Color by Bolu Babalola. And I DNF'd this for different reasons than the other books. This was perfectly fine. That's the best way I can describe it, is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The only thing is, this is an anthology collection. So it's an anthology collection of African-inspired fantasy. Yeah, African mythology-inspired fantasy romances. So it sounds like exactly what I would like. My thing is, this fell into the same trap that I feel like a lot of novellas fall into, and an anthology book or anthology collection is basically a collection of novellas. And the same problem is, nothing is really developed to the point where I am engaged with anything that's happening. Not the characters, not the plot, not the world building. Everything is just one step away from being something that I would actually enjoy. So even though I got to, I think probably exactly 50%, I got to page 160 and it's about 300 pages, so pretty much exactly 50%. There was nothing about it that made me like, okay, I want to read the next story. After I finished the story, I'd be like, okay, it's cool. It's cool. I didn't hate it. Did I love it? Do I care about it? Am I going to remember this after I close this book? Absolutely not. But nothing about it was bad. So the enjoyable factor of this book was just meh, but not enough for me to be like, this was a bad book, or I'm not going to read any more of Bolu Babalola's things. I'm currently in the middle of Honey and Spice, which is so different and so amazing. But this was more about the collection and the style of the narratives that are collected in this book than it was the actual narrative. So the actual stories were completely fine. They delivered on what they were meant to deliver. The mythological aspect, the world building of African mythology, the romantic fantasy of it, all of that was built really well and done really well in each of these anthologies, but it just wasn't enough for me to be invested, for me to care, or for me to want to read the next one. And I think that's really the reason I DNF'd it, when I could be focusing on like her new book or other books where I'm invested on some focus of the book. So that's why this one, it's not like I don't recommend this. If you do like anthologies, you like fantasy anthology, and you like romantic anthologies, and you like novellas, I do think this is a great book for you. It's more of the medium in which these stories were told than the actual stories that I just wasn't jiving with. There's a difference. So yeah. So the next book I DNF'd in, I think February, was on Kindle Unlimited, and you know Kindle Unlimited is so many gems, but also just accessible. Not too much on Kindle Unlimited. Like some of my favorite books I've discovered on Kindle Unlimited, then I had to buy physically because I love them that much, but also accessible of all kinds of things. So proceed with caution. So this book is called The Grim Reaper's Lawyer. By the title alone, it's just giving Kindle Unlimited. It's giving, of course, it's giving you should not expect too much. I made the mistake of expecting too much because this cover is gorgeous. The cover is gorgeous, and it started off very, very interesting. So basically it's about this girl. She dies. She dies within like the first 3 pages of the book or something. She dies. She hates being a lawyer. She had an incident, this nebulous incident that they keep on referring to somewhere in the book, but we don't get it. And I DNF'd this book at 45%. So I was in there. But we don't get the reason. We don't get this nebulous thing that's hanging over her head. We don't get that until like past 45%. Obviously, I don't know what happens there. And she's a lawyer. She hates who she works for. She hates being a lawyer. She hates the type of things she has to do as a lawyer. She has to defend criminals who she knows she's guilty. She has to defend bad people. And her boss is also very misogynistic and rude. All these things, right? So she dies. She dies really early on, and then she goes into the afterlife. She goes into purgatory. In order for her to elevate to heaven, she has to be the Grim Reaper's lawyer. So interesting, very interesting premise. And she doesn't agree to be the Grim Reaper's lawyer because she was a lawyer and she did all kinds of like things that are categorized as bad, like defending people who she knew committed these crimes. She would be going to hell. So she at first doesn't agree to do it, but then after she's like, hell is hellish, so she agrees to do it. And it just, after that point, like that point is like that, it's an interesting book. I'm in it. I'm enjoying it. Like, it's good. After that point, everything goes into mundaneness. And how could a book that takes place in purgatory with grim rapers and a grim raper's lawyer, and there's some kind of trial around this grim raper, like violating grim raper death law, how could a book with all of that going on be absolutely mundane and boring. I don't know, but it was. That's exactly what it was. Nothing happens after that. It proceeds almost too casually, and it proceeds almost too casually in a way that's boring. So we stop. That's also where we stop getting any real character development from the male main character as well as the female main character, and we start to get more of kind of like the setting of purgatory, the other characters in purgatory, how things work as a Grim Reaper, which would be interesting as long as that wasn't the bulk of, I say, from the 10% to the 45% mark. All of that, like 35%, that's all it was when there's a story that needs to be developing. And yeah, that was it. It just got to the point where I could not care. If I DNF'd that book, I know I would not think about it another second after that. And I feel like that's the point where I know I need to DNF a book, because if I don't care, if I'm not invested in anything, what's the point of reading it? And that's exactly what happened with this book. I just wanted more of the actual plot to move forward. Like, she's the Grim Reaper's lawyer. Things need to be happening. Grims need to be reaping. Like, what's going on? Nothing was going on. It talked about more of like her day-to-day in purgatory. Like literally her meals, her meeting people, her kind of learning what a Grim Reaper does, but in the most mundane way, not in any way that's exciting, not in any way that I'm invested in learning more. And it just started to fall extremely flat. And after the high of the first 10%, the low just went on for the 35% of the book, to the point where just like, I cannot with good conscience keep reading this book, so I'm gonna DNF it. That's exactly what happens. The cover's gorgeous. The cover's gorgeous. This is a book cover that if I had liked it, even though I read it on Kindle, I would have bought it. Because if I would have wanted to reread it, I would have wanted to reread it physically. But because it was absolutely horrible, I didn't. In my head, I DNF'd like 14 books, but I think I only DNF'd 5, which is honestly doing well. By the end of the year, I assume I would have DNF'd 30 books, which is a great number. I'm trying to keep it under 40. As long as it's under 40, I'm doing good. So thank you for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, please put this trash can. No offense to these books, they're not trash, they were just trash for me, but woman's trash and the woman's treasure. I was gonna say something else. If you like this video, make sure to like this video and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later.